It would be wonderful, as we were discussing just a little while ago, if NATO and our country could get along with Russia. Right now, we're not getting along with Russia at all. We may be at an all-time low in terms of relationship with Russia. This is built for a long period of time. But we're going to see what happens.
A yes or no answer. Does President Trump believe that the Russian government interfered in the 2016 elections?
I think I have not sat down and talked to him about that specific thing. Obviously, we've been dealing with a lot of other issues today. I'd be glad to touch base.
I got a few headlines today, that answer about whether Russia interfered in the election at all. This as Russia has threatened U.S. aircraft after the shoot down of a Syrian fighter jet in Syria.
Mr. Secretary, what's your response to Russia's latest actions in Syria?
We're in discussions.
Are you confident that U.S. forces won't be shot down?
I'm confident that we are still communicating between our Operations Center and the Russian Federation Operations Center, and I'm also confident that our forces have the capability to take care of themselves.
Conventional wisdom in U.S. forces is that it's bluster from the Russians, as we've seen before, but it's still a tense situation over Syria. We're back with the panel. Michael, thoughts?
Very dangerous situation. It's ironic, Brett, because when Donald Trump came into office, at least foreign policy hawks in Washington were worried he was going to cut a deal with Vladimir Putin that would be too soft, that would give away the store to Russia. Now we have this environment where tensions are actually escalating, and we may be stumbling into an unwanted confrontation with Russia, partly because I think the Trump administration is under a lot of pressure right now not to be seen to be reaching out too much. You know, actually, I've noticed no communication that I'm aware of between Rex Tillerson and his counterparts, certainly no phone call between Trump and Vladimir Putin since the infamous day in the Oval Office. And meanwhile, you're having these close calls, as I think Jennifer Griffin explained in an earlier segment, in Eastern Europe, the Baltics. NATO is doing big military exercises now, essentially simulating war between NATO and Russia. Russia's going to have a major military exercise in Belarus this fall. A lot of opportunity for miscalculations, and the big question is, Trump is likely to see Vladimir Putin at the G20 summit next month. What's going to happen there? That will be a potential turning point.
Mercedes.
But I think it shows the Trump administration's leadership in dealing with Russia. Russia for too long has been getting away with in the control situation in terms of Syria and with President Assad. But I think for the most part, what you're seeing with this administration is they're saying, we're sending a warning. You basically they warn the pilots several times, do not get near our forces that are focusing on counter-ISIS operations, and we're not going to tolerate that. And so I think it's a very direct message, something that we saw when there was a chemical attack in the last couple of months in Syria, and we sent Tomahawk cruise missiles into the area. So I think, Brett, what we're seeing is the Trump administration is not afraid to take action. This is something that, at least in this administration, is showing strength as opposed to what we saw with President Obama and his administration and their lack of action.
The reason I say it's bluster likely is because most of the jets fly east of the Euphrates. They're talking west of the Euphrates, number one. Number two, they looked at the Turkish situation where the Turks shot down a Russian fighter jet, and then a couple weeks later, Russia and Turkey were A-OK.
And yet another example, when we did the Tomahawk strike on the air base, the Russians said the same thing. We're ending cooperation. We're going to have a free-for-all up there in the skies. And it actually didn't happen. The cooperation continued. Nonetheless, I think we're headed into a much more dangerous period. And the reason is that the ISIS phase of the Syrian civil war is going to end soon. In other words, ISIS is going to be dealt with. They're losing Mosul. They're being surrounded now in Raqqa. If and when that happens, and it could be within 6 months or a year, then what's left on the ground is this Iran, Russia, Hezbollah, Assad coalition on the one side, and then the Saudis, the Egyptians, the Jordanians, the forces, the rebels on the ground, and us on the other side. Then there is no third party that we can hit together. It's us and them. And the Iranians and the Russians are looking at a prize. Winning Syria, keeping Syria, the Russians being the dominant great power in the region. Putin hungers to recover great power status, and I think he's willing to risk more than we think. Not now. I think it's early. They're not going to go shooting down our airplanes, but this is going to be, with ISIS eliminated, it's going to be even more dangerous.
Surprised to hear the Ukrainian president with his praise of President Trump and also hearing the talk of sanctions.
That's very encouraging, because everybody assumed, you know, in these hearings, what we're getting is, you know, was the Trump campaign negotiating in advance of giving up of sanctions? There's no indication of that. There's no caving in on the Russians. Perhaps Putin is pretty disappointed in his old pal, new pal, Trump, and that's one of the reasons that he's taken a really tough line.
You know, I want to turn real quickly to the aftermath of the death of Otto Warmbier. The president said today it should never have happened. Total disgrace. Should have been brought home sooner. Is there fallout here that potentially is another tension situation with North Korea?
Absolutely. It just increases the pressure. I think it galvanizes public opinion. I mean, actually, North Korea is a problem that foreign policy insiders kind of obsess about, but I think a lot of Americans feel like it's not really a kitchen table issue for them. But when you have a 20-something American college student who's paraded out and sobbing on camera, sent back to his family in a coma, I think that brings North Korea home for people in a new way. But, Brett, it remains the fact there are no good options on North Korea. So Donald Trump may be invigorated to crack down and do something tough, but what is that? What is the answer? There's no good option, and I don't think we have any more clarity which of the bad options Trump is ready to choose.
And obviously he doesn't think China has done enough, said they've tried, but it hasn't happened yet, today in a tweet.